Hello everyone and welcome to this video where we're going to be talking about one question and one question only, and that is Stormworks only catered to engineers and technical people? So, I've thought about this for a long time now. Being an engineer myself, I thought about what this means. Is this game catered for people that are only think in technical terms, or is it catered for the general public? And the short answer, no, it's not. And the reason behind that is the following. But first, to fully understand exactly why it is no, I begin with my Discord community. So, the community that I have on my Discord server is made up of a bunch of people. There's professionals, and not just engineers, but programmers, mechanics, pilots, coast guards, oil field technicians, and students that are interested in engineering and the field of engineering. And then of course there's, younger people that are still maybe in high school or even earlier that are just interested in building things, and honestly, power to them, because you start with something like this and the world's your oyster. On my Discord server, all these different people come together and lend a hand on what they know and their knowledge and all that type of stuff. But with that comes the understanding that the game is intended for people, first of all, to have fun. It's not just a game where you're stuck doing work, meaningless tasks or something like that. It's actual concrete knowledge. So that's one thing. You do trials, tests, you build things, you collaborate if you want. You can end up with something that is a viable product, pretty much. Now, my experience with engineering games in general, and by engineering games I mean games intended to be where you have to build things, where you have to design things, where you have to work within parameters, so anything like that, my experience is zero. The last engineering style game I played was probably more than 10 years ago, and it was called Armadillo Run. Look it up if you want. It's a two-dimensional game where you develop a system to help an armadillo cross over to some sort of portal. So it's totally different than this. This is a three-dimensional game that uses all sorts of parameters and forces and stuff, so totally different. But that said, I would pretty much say that there are different skill levels and almost age gaps and age differences for different segments of Stormworks. So let's begin with something like the building aspect. So you obviously have to spawn a vehicle even to get started in the game. So you could go up to, you can load what they give you, their preset vehicle. And if you open up their starter boat, it has kind of a simple system and engine and whatever. So you could start with this, of course. But if you want to build something yourself using cubes and blocks and all these items in the inventory, you don't have to be an expert. It's no different than building anything with Lego or any kind of inventory to your disposal. You just put things together. So, to start building, you could be a beginner. You just have to have a basic understanding and knowledge of maybe pivot systems and mechanical systems, but you could even get away without using them for the first little while. You don't need pivots. You just need to understand how to build sort of a simple structure or simple equipment or boat or whatever, and then attach the engine. That is a little more complex. It's a little more like Lego Technic. It's a little more like actual programming, but it's not that difficult in the very basic sense. Obviously, you can go ham or go nuts with, attaching all sorts of nodes and microcontrollers and systems and automation and whatever, but at the very basic form, you could be a beginner. So the building, you could be a beginner, so you could be a teenager or in junior high school or something like that. You don't have to be university educated to start building. And then sometimes I see comments like, oh, I wish there was no electric yet to connect, or I wish there was no composite or whatever. That all comes down to different levels of skill, and that's totally fine. You could get around with just using the most basic electric. You could also just have infinite electric spawned and you don't have to do anything. So you get to set your difficulty level with that, but you could also take it to the next level, like I said, and go the step further. The next aspect of the game is after you've built something, you can do gameplay. Or like I said, you could use their pre-made vehicles if you so desire. So you don't have to use the, call it more intricate way of doing things. You could just get around by using their pre-made vehicles. So let's say you do that. The gameplay itself, fairly basic in a general sense. And in a general sense, I mean, you go and accomplish missions, you rescue people, you deliver goods, you do all sorts of stuff. So there's not that much, call it craziness or difficulty with the general gameplay. And that's sort of the intention. It gives you that much creativity and ability to set and do what it is you want to do. So gameplay, again, you could be a beginner, you can be in, junior high school, you don't have to be university educated, you don't have to be a professional. You can enjoy the gameplay for what it is, go rescue people, deliver things, or just enjoy the beautiful sunsets in the game, and that is totally a-okay. But now we get into a bit of the more dicier things. So while the answer still is no, you don't have to be an engineer or a technical professional to enjoy this game, there are aspects that being an engineer or a technical professional definitely does help, and you can excel in what the game has to offer if you have that extra little bit of knowledge. So that's what we're about to get into now. But even before we get into the technical knowledge and experience, more advanced builds come from experience. Even when you start off with the most basic boat or basic airplane or whatever it is, that can be done relatively with ease, let's say. But to get into bigger builds, more advanced things, more advanced programming, I think experience is needed, because there is a bit of a learning curve to this game. You have to take the time to understand exactly what it is you're getting into, how the different mechanics work, how the microcontroller systems work. So with experience, you'll be able to excel. And I mean, building a bigger creation is never an issue. You can go from a small plane to a big plane, and that generally doesn't take much. It's just the same systems in a bigger format. Maybe you need bigger engines and stuff, but that's not where it's difficult per se. It's when you start adding features and different types of things, that's where the skill level has to sort of increase. And now some of it can come from building experience, and some of it will have to come from research and knowledge and all that other stuff. So I briefly touched on this, but a big aspect of getting a little bit more advanced with your creation is the logic setup. Now obviously the more intricate a creation is, the more difficult the logic becomes. So like I showed many times, here we have a whole vault of microcontrollers, and take a look at their nodes. Someone might get anxious looking at this, but if you take it step by step, you can. So maybe that's experience talking from the game, maybe that's just overconfidence, I don't know, but I've seen people with double the amount of microcontrollers that you see here still excelling. And whether they're technical people, I don't know, so I can't say, but I do imagine that understanding the way the game implements logic is not difficult. And then there's a learning curve that's associated with more complex controllers, but you can either figure them out yourself, or you can, borrow from others or download from the workshop. So it's not the end of the world. And generally, microcontrollers like that, you can figure out how they work. Now, you need simple understanding of the logic gates. So of course, you can't be totally in the dark with all this stuff, but a microcontroller could be as simple as this. This is the one I've been showing in my beginner series, except this is the one I've kind of polished up for my use and included a little bit of a reset control for the autopilot and stuff. So this is the basic microcontroller that I made over 2 years ago for my first ship, and I'm still using it today, just a little bit changed. Of course, this is quite simple. You can get into very complex ones. You can get into all sorts of things where you have receive signals through antennas and whatever. But again, that's just experience. And now a little bit of programming would help, understanding of logic gates. I would say some education, whether formal or informal, would be required at this point. And it could be something as simple as like a high school competition could have programming with logic gates, and you can apply the knowledge from something like that, from what one would learn in a or a high school level class, break it down on a piece of paper, write it down, and then explain how you'd exactly make it work. This is without the mathematics. So of course, like your square root and tan and whatnot, that does make things more difficult. So I'd say for this, you'd probably be looking at a 12th grade education or post-secondary, university, college, something like that. And that's just the nature of the game. With more complex things, the programming stuff that I showed in other videos with the scanning lasers underwater and whatnot, I mean, I think you have to be a professional programmer to do something like this. So we go from basic microcontrollers that I'd say can be done even by teenagers up to something like entering university. Obviously engineers and programmers, but I'm saying the minimum level of experience, and you could take it all the way up to where you're writing Lua scripts and where you're doing programming, where you're understanding actual physical programming. I mean, people make a living doing stuff like this, so it's not something that we can just take up overnight. But with research, with understanding, you may be able to teach yourself. The game does offer some help, not very much, but at least some to get you a basic knowledge. Then there's lots of videos on the internet, whether just for Lua or whether for Stormworks specifically. So with that, you would probably need, I'd say, post-secondary or professional experience, but you certainly can just download someone's microcontroller from the workshop and give them credit and use it. I mean, to this day, I still have not written my own scanning radar because I just prefer using the ones that I found. They were so nicely made and polished, so I just use them and credit the owners and go on about my business. But for things like my anchor controller, I've made from scratch. For things like my ship hold and thrusters, like this guy, I made from scratch. So this is one of my most complex creations because it not only has a ship hold function, it has stabilizers, active stabilizers, thrusters, all that stuff is built into it. So it's fairly advanced. It uses 2 GPSs, all that stuff. But I did not have this right off the bat. This was after a long time of just making basic things before I could build something like this. And even once I built this, I pretty much promised myself I wouldn't build something as intricate and complicated as this. It was just overwhelming to the point I was losing sleep sometimes thinking about this thing, which is kind of funny, kind of sad, but it is what it is. So that is where you get to the most complex level, where I would say you need post-secondary education, you'd need college, university, something a bit more advanced to do really crazy programming and undertake massive multi-scope projects where you have all sorts of things coming to play. You know, that just takes, first of all, planning. So you have to plan out your time, you have to manage yourself, because even to build the little boat in the back of this would take some time, of course, and the helicopter inside this. So multi-scope projects for sure need that much more concentration, but I think they could be pulled off by most people as well if you dedicate yourself to this game. So what I mean by that is, if you're jumping back and forth between this and then going to another game and then Minecraft and then Grand Theft Auto, then whatever, you know, you're not really dedicating yourself to the art of this game. You're just really doing the basic level of understanding. But if you take the time to dig deeper into it, you can do it. Okay, so that is sort of what I found out with my 2+ years of experience, 6,000 hours, all that stuff, and of course my engineering background. So at the basic level, I would say this game is catered towards people with a creative and a mechanically inclined mindset. So you want to understand how mechanics works, you want to understand engineering. Maybe you're a mechanic, maybe you're a technical person, maybe you have a lot of experience with boats, with vehicles. So the game's catered towards people like that, but it does not mean you have to be a programmer, be an engineer, have that type of university or post-secondary experience to enjoy this game. There's many aspects of this game that are enjoyable, I'd say, to most gamers, to most people. And unless your forte is, you know, fantasy or first-person shooters, but if it's some kind of creative style game, I imagine this is very much for you. And the nicest thing is that the skills that you learn in this game, as funny as it is to say, like what you learn in programming, in an application, you can apply that both to your university and your actual career moving forward. You can become a project manager, you could become a programmer, you could become an engineer based on some of these things that you'll learn playing this game. So I found that extremely valuable, especially in today's market when there's so much competition. Having that little bit of edge, I mean, obviously you wouldn't say in your resume played video games, but you'd have that knowledge that you can apply and take forward with you for the rest of your life. So I would say that that is an invaluable skill to have. So thank you all for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video. Hope that made a bit of clarity, and stay tuned for more. And as always, happy Stormworksing.